Hey everyone, it's Greg from Six Sided Discs, and welcome to All Six Sides, our podcast where we explore the world of disc golf from every angle. This week we're joined by the disc golf guy himself, Terry Miller. You can find Terry on his YouTube channel, The Disc Golf Guy, his podcast, Smashbox TV, and of course, the Disc Golf Network. Make sure you tune into Terry's channel, The Disc Golf Guy, for next day coverage of the 2024 Memorial Championship, presented by Discraft and Spinners on the Green, with the likes of Anthony Barella, Aaron Gossage, Jennifer Allen, Gannon Burr, Owen Scoggins, and world champion Isaac Robinson all competing. It's shaping up to be the biggest event Terry's channel will cover this year. Terry's journey in disc golf has seen him active in nearly every facet of the sport, including as a professional player, course designer, tournament director, professional play-by-play commentator, podcast host, and producer of top-quality disc golf coverage. Terry, thank you so much for joining us today.
Appreciate it, Greg. Sorry, everyone. I'll apologize ahead of time. I'm a little under the weather, but hopefully disc golf will kind of clear some of that out and get us all excited about this upcoming season.
Oh, absolutely. We are very much looking forward to the start of the season. I want to take a little bit of time to talk about all the different facets of what you've done in disc golf. But before we get there, let's maybe get back to the origins of your nickname, the Disc Golf Guy. Where does that come from?
It really just came from, believe it or not, reading a book. And I read a book about social media, of all things, which I know in a sense almost sounds counterintuitive right off the bat, right? It seems a little weird. But in late 2009, I was handed a book, and it was called Crush It by Gary Vaynerchuk, who has now gone on to become an industry leader and a worldwide figure. And that was his first ever book. It was, I think, literally 99 pages, and they were even small at that. And he just talked all about following your passion and how basically anyone with a passion or a hobby could probably turn that into a career. It would take a lot of work. It might mean working a second or a third job or doing other things to kind of build upon it. But I was already doing disc golf full time. And then at that point, it was really in reading that book that night, which of course talked a little bit about branding. I was like, everybody just calls me the disc golf guy. When I go to a park and rec meeting, they say, "Oh, the disc golf guy's here," or I do a demo at a school or at a church camp or a clinic or at a park and rec or whatever it is, they'd be like, "Oh, the disc golf guy is here." And when I'd stock discs at a local hardware store next to a course that I designed, I'd show up, they'd call to the back, and they'd say, "The disc golf guy is here." They would just say that. And everyone listening has probably been called the disc golf guy at some point in their life, right? To your friends or family, you're known as the disc golf guy or the girl that plays disc golf. And at that point, my other nickname was T-Dog with two G's. And then when you spell out like disc golf guy and there's like a T, a D, and two G, like it worked. And of course, within that book, it talked about the branding, and available was on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. All of those were available for that branding. The discgolfguy.com, all of that was available. And I was like, yeah, why not? I'm the disc golf guy. This is my life.
Yeah, that's really cool. I like almost how it becomes inclusive. Like we're all the disc golf guy in some respect.
Exactly.
We all sort of feel connected to you through that.
Yeah. Like I said, every one of us has been called that, whether it's from one group of friends to another or, to some other circle that's outside of yours. You're always referred to as, like the disc golf guy, the guy that plays disc golf all the time. So it has been a lot of fun. And some people will tell me they correct others and say, no, I'm not, the disc golf guy. Nonetheless, it's been a lot of fun. Yeah. I haven't patented it. I don't know. Maybe I got to talk to my friends at Sunstein or somewhere else, possibly.
Yeah, you're the disc golf guy, and I'm just a disc golf guy, right? So before we kind of dig into other aspects of maybe what people know you better for, you obviously began, like many people, by playing disc golf. So what were some of the first courses that you played? Where did you hear about or learn about disc golf? And who introduced you to the sport?
I continue to be one of those fortunate people that say I found disc golf when I was a kid. Most people say, "Oh, I just found it like when I was in my 30s or 40s or 20s or whatever." I was introduced to a form of disc golf, frisbee golf, I guess you'd call it, in between 7th and 8th grade. And I was at camp. They had us taking regular frisbees that actually had Jeffrey the giraffe for any old school Toys R Us people out there, and they had us throw those regular frisbees into little grocery baskets, just like when you go shopping and you only get a few items. They put grocery baskets up, and they had an 18-hole course set up at this camp I was at, and I absolutely loved it. I played it when they introduced us to the competition.
Mm-hmm.
I played it, and then I remember I skipped dinner, which even today is a big deal. Like I skipped dinner at the hall just so I could keep playing it. It was just so much fun. And I was no more of a frisbee fanatic than you or anyone else. I had no special background in frisbee. I played baseball and wrestling and soccer and football and all those other things as a kid, but I was no more frisbee oriented than anyone else. And then I found out about a course when I got home from camp. That's when I bought my first couple of discs. And then I used to ride my bike, outside of town, uphill both ways. I think my one speed, to get to this course. And that's where I ran into a couple of guys who actually weren't running the course. Me and my buddies used to run it because it was just so much fun. And we're like, well, you throw and then you run to your shot and then you throw it. It wasn't a sprint, but we were playing as much as we could. And then I saw these guys with bags and they were walking. I'm like, what are these old guys doing? Well, it turned out to be two of my closest friends in Tom Jenkins, along with John Turlap, and no relation to the Jenkins family from Ohio, but Tom Jenkins and John Turlap are old school disc golfers. And from there, I learned about leagues, then tournaments, and then traveling to my first Worlds a couple years later. And I don't know, I guess as they say, the rest is history. So that was in somewhere around like 92, 93, somewhere in that neighborhood is when I was first introduced, right around the age of like 12, 13, 14, somewhere in that neighborhood. And now I'm 45 to date stamp this. So more than 30 years.
And I love hearing about how different people experience and discover disc golf. Whether that like more recently, we're seeing a lot of people discover it through COVID or post COVID in this sort of boom time that we're in. Whether that's through social media or YouTube. But then, of course, there's some of us that discovered it by accident. I was riding my bike across town in high school with a friend of mine, and we just happened to go to this spot. I think it was 10, 15 miles across town that we liked, and we're riding across this dam, and then there's these like metal poles with baskets, and we see people throwing frisbees, and we're like, wow, that looks pretty cool. So we went to the local gas station to get a snack, and there they were selling discs in the gas station right next to the course. So we had to get involved.
Yeah. Uh, it's funny because even to this day, some people are like, what? Like disc golf didn't just like start like 5 years ago? I mean, there's a lot of people, and it's fair. You don't know the history. I mean, we're still relatively young. 1976, I think, is when the PDGA started. So we're not that old in the grand scheme of things, but there's to this day some people that, oh, I thought my dad started that. There's a lot of people that still kind of have that mentality. People were throwing frisbees at trees for many, many years, but yes, your dad did not start disc golf, so you can address that right now.
It's so funny. It's really like one of those things that kids do. Like, no, my dad did that first.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
All right. So back before you became the disc golf guy that we've come to know, you were competing as a player in Wisconsin, picking up your first MPO win at the Tundra Tourney in Green Bay in July of 2000. If you could cast your memory back to then, what would you say are some of your proudest accomplishments as a player?
That certainly, turning pro, that was the moment, you kind of became a professional, is this moment you accepted any cash. And you could still argue to this day as to what that looks like. Uh, Earlier in that same year, I had turned down cash at a couple of the events I played because I thought I was going to play one more year of Am Worlds.
Yeah.
And then finally, it was in March, I believe, March or April of that year, a little earlier, I had tied Avery Jenkins at a tournament in Michigan. And he was just coming into the scene. We're the same age, but, he is already becoming legendary or an up and coming superstar. And I tied him and I'm like, why am I turning down this cash? Just start playing pro, like where I feel like I now belong. So going back to those times and just having the idea of not only cashing but then possibly winning tournaments, even at a local level, those of course are some of your most proud moments because that's what you're trying to do is win these tournaments. We always had the struggle in Wisconsin though of having Barry Schultz here. And so to show up to a tournament and to have to get past Barry Schultz and then Aaron Wild, who may or may not have finished second or third to me at that event, was also he was a 17-year-old phenom. I was only a few years older, but he went on in what 99, had just finished seventh in the world at the world championship. So getting past him was certainly kind of a big deal. And um, just being officially considered a professional, like that was, I feel like, so much more of a thing than it is today. And I'm not discrediting any professionals, but that jump, that movement, that distinction, even if it was $7, you were excited, like, hey, I've cashed, I'm now a professional. And we didn't really have ratings the way we do today, and we didn't have the competition either, but the way things have evolved have been just absolutely incredible. So that, and right around that time, I think me and my partner, my buddy playing in big doubles tournament, to clarify, him and I had won what was called the Real Ice Bowl here in Milwaukee. And that was one of the premier doubles tournaments in the country. And again, the likes of Barry Schultz were there. Dave Greenwell had been up for more than one. We had players coming from Michigan all the time. Him and I had won that event right around that time frame as well, and that was as big as any A tier or super tour or whatever we used to call them. That was as big as any other tournament, and it was a doubles tournament that we took down, unsanctioned, but that was definitely an early one. And then anytime I went to Michigan and played in the crack plastic, that was also, I think I've won more money out of Kalamazoo, Michigan, excuse me, than any other park. And that every time I've been there and performed well there, that's certainly feels like some of the early moments that stick out.
Yeah, it's interesting, how earning money might make you a professional, but success these days in disc golf looks like a lot of different things. It could be bragging rights at your local course. Obviously there's taking cash and being professional. But there's a guy in Central Ohio who basically just through social media
Mm.
has become a sponsored member of Discmania's, social media team, and he's found his own kind of success in that.
Yeah, it was you played, you ran tournaments, you designed courses. Those are all things that might have you involved. Of course, you could be a volunteer, but even volunteering wasn't as much of a necessity. I mean, we've had them, but it wasn't, you didn't need 30 volunteers to put on a tournament because your tournament just wasn't that big. You might have only had 30 people at your tournament, in fact. So it's crazy to see that now there's all these different facets and avenues in which people, like you said, could garner success or consider themselves viable, successful, contributing. There's so much more that you can take and give to the sport today than there was all those years ago.
Oh, absolutely. And you mentioned a couple things in there that I want to touch on later, course design and tournament directing, for example. But before we get there, I think a lot of newer people within the sport, their first opportunity to see you throw discs was at the Celebrity Pro-Am at Funky Farms, I believe,
Mm.
just a couple of years ago, which was super fun to watch. What are some discs that are staples in your bag whenever you do get the opportunity to get out and play?
Yeah, I haven't changed my bag much in the last, I'll say 7 to, like, 9 years, and that's largely because that's when I quit playing of any kind of real seriousness, so it doesn't do me a lot of good. I've never been a channel, nor will I be a channel that's out reviewing plastic. I feel like if you are constantly selling and or playing, that makes it that much more viable for you to actually do reviews. But
Hmm.
there could be 10 new discs that drop today, and I know I'm not going to be adding them to my bag. So going out and trying to review them or talk about them just it doesn't even appeal to me. I don't think my heart would be in that. So with that, just
So you're not interested in that new Clash discs plastic that they dropped this morning, huh?
yeah, the tone, like I love seeing it, and I should be like aware of what's going on, and to some degree who's throwing what and some pros and cons. Like I feel like it's my job to know some of that, but in order to go out and actively involve it, or actively uh I don't know, make it part of my my overall routine, just is not going to be worth it. And to be frank, my form and my play is so sporadic in the first place that no matter what new disc comes out tomorrow, it's not fixing my problems, all right, or my bad habits from 30 years. So with all that being said, I'll back up real quick and just say briefly, for 2 years, I was sponsored by Discraft, 2005 and 2006. That was after Innova had actually said, we're not interested in sponsoring you. Barry kind of put in a word for me, and they said, well, you're not quite 1,000 rated. You might be close, but you're not there. And so immediately Discraft picked me up, which was incredible.
Yeah.
And a couple years later, I ran Am Worlds, and I think Innova was then starting their ambassador team, and I was one of the first ever people on the ambassador team, as someone who was doing a lot of things and was a
Mm,
decent player, but they liked me more so for all the advocacy that I was doing. So
right.
then I was sponsored from Innova from 2007 to 2014. And at that point is when I got a little bit more serious with Legacy Discs, my buddies Steve and Bomberico over at Legacy. And we had made the change to say, hey, I'm going to be sponsored by Legacy. And that was short lived, only because then
Mm,
my career of being a content creator had kind of taken off. And
that
at
makes
that
sense.
point, I found that every weekend it was going to be, for lack of a better term, a pissing match with somebody about my affiliation. And so at that point, I said, thank you, Legacy, for being willing to support my vlogs and what I'm doing. However, just to kind of avoid that conflict of interest, I'm not going to consider sponsorship from you for that reason, because, if you go to a big Discraft event, they don't want it to be presented by Legacy, having the coverage presented by them, and so on and so forth. Anyway, so with all that being said, I have a largely Innova bag mixed in with some Discraft Comets, which are my favorite, some old school Comets from the 90s. My Innova discs are largely Wraiths, KC AVRs, Ontario Rocks from the 90s. And that's the majority. I do throw a Shrike once in a while, and then now, after visiting in Sweden and being walked around by Thomas Ekstrom over there, I have been handed a few other discs, including a Pure, a Bolt, a Fuse, um, an Explorer, and a River. Have all kind of, again, if I play, they might get thrown. But I'm not out in the field putting in reps. Let's put it that way. So lots of 90s rocks and comets, I would say, are the bread and butter, along with some pro race and star race. Those are kind of my main throwers.
How often do you actually get out to play a casual round these days?
I was just thinking, I don't know where my bag is. There's a putting league tonight, and I'm trying to remember where my bag is. So that tells you, I don't know that I've played. I maybe have only played once since going to Estonia in September.
Yeah.
So that tells you it's been like 3 or 4 months, and I would like to get back out. Now I'm gearing up to travel a whole bunch, but short answer is probably only once or twice a month. And I always say this: I could play more. I could make it more of a priority, but there's just all too often I'm like, well, I could edit 9 more holes, or I could go get a round of golf in right now. And the idiot in me says, well, just edit 9 more holes. So I don't play as much as I should. Maybe I can change that in 2024. I think I said that last year, but I'll do it again. I'll do it this year.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I probably relate a little bit too much with the like, where's my bag thing. I've done that a few times recently where I either can't find my bag, or I took all the discs out of it to go record something on the course, and then I'm not really sure where the discs are. I think it's just the life of being somebody who kind of like works in disc golf, but also wants to play disc golf, is trying to find time to do both of those things.
Yeah, yeah, it's there's been a couple times where I can't find exactly like my regular bag, so I have to grab a handful of discs that were somewhere else, and next thing you know, I go out and play with those. In fact, I went to a tournament about this time 2 years ago, and I didn't pack my bag. I forgot it for this little C tier. So I just had to like round up a few other bags, and then I actually shot like 10, 20 golf with a couple of random backups that I had along and a few borrowed discs. So maybe there's something to be said about that.
There might be, absolutely. So many people know you these days, Terry, as a content creator. As you said, Terry, the producer from the YouTube channel. And I want to drop just a few statistics for anyone who's not brushed up on the Disc Golf Guy trivia. You started your channel in 2010. You've uploaded so far over 1,400 videos. That's 24 million lifetime views. And you're at about 94,500 subscribers at the time of this recording. So you're about to hit that coveted 100,000 subscriber mark, which I have some questions about. That's a feat that's only been achieved so far by, as far as I can count, 4 channels: Paul Macbeth, Simon Lizotte, Jomez, and the Pro Tour itself. So what does it mean to you to be approaching that milestone? And is that a number that ever even seemed possible in your head?
No, I had no idea. The internet was YouTube was complete. It was a different world. It was in this very office. I filmed my first ever vlog. I read that book and then like hours later filmed the first ever vlog. It still probably has less than 1,000 views. And I talked about the katana just coming out. I talk about a new Clash DVD that just came out.
Yeah.
So that will date you completely. That the katana and a Clash DVD were the hottest news in disc golf. They truly were. And so no, I had no aspirations. I had no ideas. I really did think it was going to be more of a review / news channel more than anything. I was like, the book basically said there's all these different ways you can go about it, and blogging was big, but I'm not a writer. I don't. I've never pretended to be. So I was like, well, I could just grab like a camera and maybe just talk about what's going on in disc golf right now. Like, what a concept, right? And that's how the first handful of episodes really went. Like, here's a couple tips. Here's what's going on in disc golf. And then it was in March of that year of 2010. I was like, I told my buddy Johnny V, I said, well, I think my channel would get some cred if I like talk to like, I don't know, like Avery Jenkins and Climo and Nico and all those guys when I go to the memorial. So maybe I should interview them. I'll like maybe get some footage and then I'll interview them. Not even still knowing what like the term B-roll was. And or knowing what an external microphone or an XLR cable was, all these things I take for granted now. And that's when my channel then started getting some highlights with B-roll. And then it wasn't until even later after that, a few years later, when it really became an actual shot-by-shot coverage kind of channel, largely. And so it was a crazy evolution. And it was myself, and I didn't know them, but Central Coast was also putting out videos. I think
Mhm.
they're over 100,000. And now I think GK Pro is, along with Gatekeeper, they're both probably over 100,000 as well. But they didn't even exist. None of those guys existed. It was me and Central Coast
That's right.
for the longest time. And I remember being excited that like Discmania was one of the only ones, or Spin TV was one of the only channels that had more subscribers than me. And they were a company, so I hardly counted them. And then Jomez, of course, came into the scene 2012, 2013 timeframe, and they took just production a whole different way. They had incredible graphics. They really consistently went with at least 2 cameras. They eventually went to 3, which I was like, that's crazy. Why? That's so much more work and editing and money. And nobody was making any money at the time. None of us were getting paid for it. I was just losing money every single weekend, and it didn't matter. It was what I wanted to do, and it just continued to evolve. So what disc golf looked like on the internet in 2010 is nothing like really what it looks like today. So I've never really had that number necessarily in mind. I didn't really care about the actual subscriber count. Now that I'm closer to 100,000, it's a cool milestone. And Jomez got there years ago, and these other channels that have committed full time to doing nonstop, shot by shot coverage of all of our best players. And with the explosion of COVID and the explosion of the tour and everything else, some of these people were able to go from almost nothing to huge channels very quickly, taking advantage of all that timing and putting out great content as well, of course. And so now that I'm finally creeping near the 100,000, I'll admit I am a little bit excited. I earned street cred with the kids. My 15-year-old and my 12-year-old will think a silver play button is so much cooler than maybe even I do. But to all of their friends, this is a YouTube generation, so I'll earn street cred with the younger generation once I have one of those silver play buttons, I guess. But yeah, I'm excited. I'll admit I'm excited. Hopefully it'll happen here probably sometime in 2024.
Very nice. Yeah. Super exciting. I will say apologies to Central Coast and GK Pro. You're absolutely right. Central Coast is at 140,000, GK Pro at 127,000. So my bad on that. I apologize for missing that.
Okay, gatekeeper's got to be at 140, 150-ish as well, I bet you. They've been, I mean, nothing for nothing.
Yeah.
I then helped started. Okay, I helped start Smashbox in 2014. I was the founding member of that with my buddy, and my efforts. A lot of people say, well, your channel fell off or it sucks or whatever. My efforts completely split in 2014, just like they are today.
Yeah.
I dedicate about 20 some weekends out of the year to live and to the pro tour, and then which used to be all on Smashbox, and then I also dedicate then the off season for most to then doing disc golf guy stuff on my channel. So unlike Jomez, who went all in 100%, only the top players at only the biggest events, of course their channel grew because they're putting out this incredible product of the best players. My channel just has a very different feel and look and vibe, and doesn't get nearly the attention from me in terms of the growth, because I was helping grow live disc golf, which eventually no one else wanted. Well, no one else wanted to do.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. Well, and I think for people that's especially this time of year when the pro tour is down, and we're kind of in the off season, things have been changing a little bit, and we're starting to have these off season moves and contract negotiations and transfers and things happening. There's a little more going on than maybe they're used to, but your coverage in Florida or Arizona or overseas is sort of this really welcome respite to keep us engaged and interested in things that are going on in the world of disc golf. I think through those, you present us with a lot of opportunities to see this up and coming talent in the disc golf scene.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was like a year or two ago that Holland Hanley popped up at a tournament that you were covering in Arizona, and it was the first time I personally had seen her on coverage. And then about a year or two later, she came and played our local A tier, the Brent Hambrick Memorial Open in Columbus, and she just ran away with it. She had something like an 18-stroke lead at one point. And so now, of course, we see her on Team Discraft on the Disc Golf Pro Tour week in, week out. So I think it's a great way to kind of present a different product in the sport, that you're covering events that the Pro Tour is not covering. We're seeing talent, up and coming talent out there for the first time, because a lot of players are trying to stay fresh at those events in the off season.
Certainly. And that's one of the things that I love so much about continuing to push forward during some of these other events that feel like they're smaller or off season is the Holland Hanley is such a great example of being, like you said, in Arizona. And then I just recognize there's someone beating Katrina and Jennifer Allen here. Who is this person? And then to backtrack to go capture 6 or 9 holes, to then interview her for her first time, to then have her on a show to make a connection with her, and at the time Dynamic, which was the front runner in terms of who she wanted for a sponsor. Like, those are special things. And at that same event at Maricopa a few years earlier, I captured Anthony Barella's first ever cash accepting. He I think finished second or fifth or whatever it was in the tournament, but I have that moment, forever recorded. He'd already been a superstar and kind of the stud, but he was actually only my height at the time and was like, much younger. So some of those moments have been just so incredibly special. And I think of a Ricky Wysocki, meeting him in 2010 at the Junior World Championships, and then a year later, I'm interviewing him for my vlog at the PDGA Championship, a major that took place that he's winning an Open. And just to be there at that moment in his career, or Paul Macbeth, seeing every one of his World Championship moments, and knowing that just a few minutes from my house is where he finished second at the Worlds in amateur, and then a few years later went on to become one of the greatest of all time. So I have a lot of those very special moments and opportunities, and that's why I love going still to like a Junior Worlds or a Masters Worlds or an Am Worlds, because I feel like, hey, I'm starting to see some of these talents a little bit earlier than some others, and hopefully getting to know them and creating a rapport with them.
Yeah, yeah, you're out there, you're the talent scout at this point. You're the person that's going to
Yeah.
uh, catch them out there, maybe point them in a direction. Hey, I know somebody that could sponsor you, or somebody that you should talk to.
That's honestly happening more often than not, and I don't say more often than not, but it's happening more often. And it then also starts getting me thinking about roles that I could play. Can I be some kind of a business manager or a conduit? I'm happy
Hmm.
just to help for the sake of helping, but I think there's also something to be said about, hey, I see some of this talent and I know who to connect them with sometimes. And yeah, maybe there's some kind of management or something that could be in my future there, because I would love to do that.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. I'll look forward to hearing maybe more about Terry's exploits as a talent scout in the future. What you can find out in your
Yeah.
off season. In your travels, and we talked about, we've covered, or you've covered a lot of events down in Arizona. I think obviously in the off season, it's taking you to warmer places. But are some of the, or as you think back to some of the events that you've covered, what would you say was the most difficult to cover? Whether that was the weather, the terrain, having to haul your gear around. What stands out?
It's funny because I'm just a few days away from going back to Southeast Asia, and it was at that event, which is great, the Samui swine that many of you are now familiar with. But there was once it was a torrential downpour. I think that was last year, and like a lot of rain in tropical
Yeah.
places, it just came out of nowhere. So I'm standing out there without an umbrella, not even thinking about rain, and then next thing you know, it's raining on my $5,000 camera. And thankfully there was a gracious golfer that was nearby that lent gave me the umbrella or stood there and helped me with it. So anytime that happens, it can be a little bit more difficult, that's for sure. um, I think a terrain, sometimes when you go to a place like the Throwdown the Mountain, which is largely a temporary, or has been a temporary course,
Yeah.
the terrain isn't completely worn in at that point. um, I don't know if I've had any, it's just always a matter of water for yourself, then gear protection in terms of, do you need an umbrella? Usually an umbrella is all I need. If I have an umbrella, I'll be good. I can manage it myself and keep myself dry. But then on top of it, the crux of some of those uh, are there restrooms nearby? Because sometimes if you're drinking a bunch of water, just like the players, you then have to use the restroom. And just the timing of all that can be difficult, because I don't want to hold up a group. I know they're playing, they're doing their thing as they should be, and I don't want to miss a shot. So it sometimes is like, wait, how far away is the restroom? Like, I think of something like the Memorial, or out in Arizona at Vista del Camino. There's a couple of restrooms, but sometimes getting to one of them in a timely fashion. So, and I have a small bladder. I mean, if we're just putting it all on the table, I have a very small bladder. So I hate that I don't drink as much water as I should. because I'm trying to plan in accordance to where we're going to be and what's going on out there. So I guess I kind of went sideways with your question, but that's probably one of the biggest challenges is, especially if you're solo camera recording for the day or the round, is, trying to gauge where's there a restroom, um, and how much water consumption are you going to have while you're out there and trying to stay hydrated. And I'm sure any women that are listening to the podcast are like rolling their eyes thinking, yeah, welcome to our world, where finding a restroom is that much more crucial usually for them. So I feel your pain in some regard. Terrain, I mean, just getting caught in rain anywhere. I think I was in Finland for the Toonie a few years ago, 2019. That was some really rainy conditions. Norway was brutal when I was there. In one of the years I went to Norway, actually both of the years I went to Norway, we had some incredible rain during that season. Uh, that's been about, I've been in a lot of rain is what I would say, but I don't know if there's a given area or time. It's just anytime you get stuck out there in some rain, it can suck.
Yeah, and technology and liquids don't go well together.
Yeah, exactly. And I always think like the scale of the, and this isn't to rip on any event, but sometimes there's players out there, and at the end of the weekend, after they've performed well and this tournament's put on a great event and everything else, and there's $2,500 going to this significant A tier, solid payout, and actually incredible payout for a weekend. $2,500 for the A tier, or $1,500, and I'm out there with a $3 or $4 or $5,000 camera. Like, there's times I'm thinking like no, wait, this math doesn't check out. Like, and I'm not suggesting, but like, you don't want to ruin a $5,000 camera, while you're out there. And maybe that's not a fair way to look at it. And I should protect my gear and all of that, of course. But sometimes I've done that math and I'm like, is this worth it to me? What am I doing? What if I ruin my camera today? That doesn't make sense. So, yeah. Well, or I'm an idiot and not, keeping my stuff protected as well as I should, or a
Well, and that
combination of
comes
all
back
those.
to what you said about reading that book. Is follow your passion, and then it doesn't become about money anymore. It's lucky for me, I wanted to pursue something I was passionate about and something that I loved. And, because of that, I don't mind staying up late and researching, podcast guests and trying to learn about things that I didn't even think I cared about. When I was preparing for our interview with Josh from AGL, I was, doing all this research on trees because all their discs are named after trees. And I didn't know why, but it felt like it was an important part of that video. So, it's cool when you're really passionate about something. It doesn't really matter, what you have to do to make it happen. You're just interested in getting it done.
Yeah, no, and that's exactly it. I remember I quit my corporate job in 2003 after getting a couple degrees in UW Milwaukee. I worked at Kohl's headquarters. Many of you have shopped at Kohl's. You have Kohl's bucks, just burning a hole in your
Yeah,
pocket, I'm
Kohl's
sure.
Cash.
Kohl's Cash, exactly.
Yeah, my wife, got $5 Kohl's Cash. Was like, oh, Kohl's Cash, and she found something for $4.99 and bought it for $5. Like,
Ah,
hey, great.
perfect. Yeah, exactly. So I worked at their worldwide headquarters, again, just 15 minutes from where I live. I worked there for 2 years after college doing, computer related things. And I up and quit one day. And that was August of 2003. And I certainly would be making, even to this day, far more money had I, maintained my career within, information systems or somewhere within computers. There's no doubt that I would be far more well off. But I also wouldn't have been to Norway and Japan and Sweden and Finland and Croatia and probably all the other experiences that I'd had either. So
Yeah,
it should not be about the money. Hopefully, money will come, but clearly it shouldn't be about the money.
yeah, I love that. So, in all those incredible experiences that you've had, all those amazing tournaments that you've been to, places that you've been to, I want to specifically focus on the ones that you were able to produce yourself. What was, everyone has, James Conrad as, the holy shot, the best shot ever. But I'm curious about for you personally, what's the best shot the most, difficult or amazing shot that you've recorded yourself?
Wow. Um, well, this comes with a slight caveat. Caveat. I have the entire 2014 World's playoff that I've never released.
Wow.
So Ricky Wysocki and Paul Macbeth go into they go into a playoff at the World Championships in 2014, and I recorded the whole thing. And there was live. Disc Golf Planet was there live, which I had done some volunteering with the previous 4 or 5 years along with them. But they were putting it out live. But then Marty McFly So High, and his production, which was him and maybe his wife at the time, they recorded it. And he did what he always did, which was the second the event or the round was done, he'd go to like his car and start editing. And he would get it out very quickly. He had it out the next morning. And at that point, I was like, well, it's out. I mean, it was like this most epic playoff in the world. Who's going to want to watch my version? He's got one out. And that was it. I recently came across the footage again the other day on one of my hard drives, and I thought this. I mean, it was some of the most yeah, high pressure, intense golf you could with a world championship on the line. It was great golf, but to know a world title was on the line in this sudden death scenario was insane. And I will at some point edit that together. And so I don't want to say it's a cop out, but I I think that watching that over and seeing that every putt, whether it was from 12 feet or 32 feet, was to win or lose the worlds in sudden death. I I have all that footage, and yeah, I'm hoping to do something special with it. This will be a 10-year anniversary of it, and it's never been seen. It's never been released. So
This sounds like the perfect storm coming together. You're going to hit 10,000 subscribers, 10-year anniversary. People are calling for the Terry cut. It's like the Justice League all over
yeah,
again. When are we going to
yeah.
see it? When are we going to see it?
I would say though that that is certainly, to me, comes to mind as like some of the most insane footage that I have, that I know that I recorded, and funny enough, it hadn't seen the light of day.
Mhm.
And then another quick side note: I have again another version of the James Conrad Ace that hasn't been seen because I also never released that. I was standing right next to the basket, and I had the same camera that I'm on now, so it wasn't anything fancy. It was just a a little DSLR camera, and I'm standing at the basket and I'm just kind of pointing it. There's no zoom. I'm just pointing it in the direction of where James and Paul are standing. And I'm at the 3 o'clock position. If you're James and Paul looking at the basket at 12 o'clock, I'm at perfectly at the circle's edge at 3 o'clock. And so I just kind of pointing it, and I kind of barely have it come into frame, and then it goes into the basket, and then the melee. Again, there's been 50 different recordings out there. I mean, DGN alone had 6 or 8 or 10 along with Jomez. And yeah, it's sitting on my one of the many copies are sitting on my desktop right now, and at some point, it'll just be a little 1-minute clip in that case, but it's yet another version of the holy shot. So I think that's kind of cool that I have my own owned copy of it, so to speak. If I ever put that out, I wouldn't owe the rights to anyone else. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah, that's really cool. So you talked a little bit about course design. I think it's actually come up even in our back and forth about
Yeah.
scheduling because you had something going on,
Yep.
and there's a big winter storm that was blowing through the Midwest. Like, would you be out on the course? Would you not? So, what courses have you worked on? In my
Mm.
research, I even saw some people talking about some of them on Reddit. So, tell me just a little bit about like what were some of the favorite projects that you've worked on?
I've when it's all said and done, because of my promoting and my just overall enthusiasm, I think I've had my hands on about 30 courses. Now, that comes with the idea that some of these are 9-hole, you know, 2,000-foot courses that are 9 holes, averaging, less than or roughly 200 feet a hole, that are on schools, that are on, there's a couple that I have at least one or two at campgrounds.
Yeah.
There's one or two that I've done at a church. A lot of projects have come, or that I've worked myself into, have come from schools, because I go to an annual school FIED show and then work with the schools, and they say, oh, we actually have 9 acres or 15 acres, or hey, could we build it around our, outside of our track and field, or out by our ropes course, so of course every school is a little different. A lot of them will say, well, we have like an open field, like, like there's nothing on it and it's an open field. I'm like, I don't want that. I want, I want your perimeter. I want any woods that you have. I want any ditches or streams. um so I've had my hands on probably 30 some courses when it's all been said and done. My my best courses are in southeastern Wisconsin, that are in what's called Kenosha County, and they're at a county parks department's property, and it's called Gray Fox and Silver Fox. Clever naming, I know. They did that. What happened is, it's kind of great that they originally, being this parks department, put in 9 holes that were just terrible, absolutely terrible. Like, you could throw in one direction and maybe go into like 3 different baskets. They were all crammed on top of each other, very dangerous in this beautiful park. And a friend of mine said, hey, we should reach out to them and see if they'd maybe redesign that. He sent a message. It didn't go over too well. And then a year or so later, I got a call from them and saying, hey, maybe you could take a look at what we have here. So they brought me out there. I said, we need to redesign this 9 holes you have, because it's terrible. It's just dangerous. It's flat out dangerous. You have way too many baskets crammed into this tiny area. And they said, well, maybe we could expand and then add 9 holes and make it an 18-hole course. And they showed me the property, and it was great. And then in driving around, I was like, wait a minute, like, we could do more than 9 holes here. We could do 18 holes. So that became the new project. We were going to design 18 new holes, and then at some point go back and redesign the original 9. And that finally all got accomplished. I want to say that was 08 or maybe 09 or 2010 or 11. I don't know, somewhere in that neighborhood. And then eventually a couple years later, they said, hey, we have another park 3 miles away that's even better. And they said, they're trying to put a mountain bike track in, or a mountain bike trail in there, before the mountain bikers claim, all the land. Let's have you come in there and also do it. So I again went back to Tom Jenkins and John Turlap, way back at the beginning of the podcast. These 2 mentors and incredible humans. They have been involved with almost every course design project that I've been part of in some capacity. They're both very smart course designers, engineer types, and sometimes even kind of take over the lead. And I'm really just more of the business conduit. So every project's been a little different. But to answer your question, Gray Fox and Silver Fox, which you've seen on some of my smaller coverage for the Cold Turkey or the Skyline Classic on my channel, those are the 2, I would say, best courses that those are the best 2 pieces of land that I've ever been handed. A lot of the other land that I've been given is meh at best, where it's like, I don't care if you're John Houck or Chuck Kennedy or Paul Macbeth, like, there's only so much you're going to do with this land. That's where about 90% of my projects have fallen. And then I have a couple of ones that I'm really, really especially proud of because the land was great. So yeah, those would be the 2 best. And they happen to be 3 miles apart from each other. And now the new one that I'm working on uh, is about 5 miles from those. And so it's a different township and a different community, and it's not quite as much good land, but I think it should be a pretty fun course as well. And that should get finalized here in 2024. In fact, they rescheduled a meeting we were supposed to have this morning, but in 2024, that should finally get done as well.
So a little bit of a hotspot developing of courses in that area. Nice.
Yeah, we're fortunate that Wisconsin is pushed, now has more than 400 courses. And that, I don't know if that's impressive to some or others, but Wisconsin's always been in the top 5 or 10 in terms of course design and development. of anywhere in the country. Of course, California and Texas, sheer size would lead you to, assume they're going to always be number one or two or in that neighborhood. But then Minnesota, Michigan, Wisconsin, Iowa, Illinois, and almost a little bit of like Ohio, Indiana area. Like we're one of the next biggest hotbeds if you're talking about a multi-state region.
So just a quick sidebar on that. It seems like there's a really great community there in Wisconsin, and even history of talented players. You were talking about
Mm-hmm.
Barry Schultz. Obviously, more recently, Adam Hammes has come out of Wisconsin. How would you sort of rate that area
Mm-hmm.
in terms of comparing it to like some other hot spots around the country? I look at like South Carolina or Texas or like Massachusetts, where there's these little pockets of talent.
Yeah, and it's funny because there's I look at it as is the talent developing there, or are we seeing more talent kind of just move or transport there? And that's not to take away from any of them, but Ricky, now claims Arizona as home, and clearly that's not, that's only in the last few years. And you're seeing a Tristan Tanner and a Ezra Aderhold and occasionally an Aaron Gossage. They're going there, for an off season. They're not. I don't want to say they're not part of the Arizona scene, but they're kind of not. Drew Gibson transferred there. All these guys are transferring, and I think that's happening a lot in Charlotte. And you're going to say the same of some parts of Florida, right? All of our top players are migrating to places where they can, you know, have a good off season in some capacity, but that still helps. Anyway, Wisconsin's had a few great players and a few people pop up. Haley King actually hails out of Wisconsin originally, not far from where I live, and Adam Hammes, and then I mentioned earlier Barry Schultz, to name a couple of them. And we've had a few other superstars that maybe have come and gone. We have good courses, and I'll always praise and love and thank everything Wisconsin's ever given me. I couldn't have started my career here if it wasn't for how disc golf was in Wisconsin. We don't have enough championship level courses. And that would be the one downside that I would say about Wisconsin disc golf. They're great. I mean, we have 300 plus really, really solid courses that you would absolutely love playing, that you would not be disappointed with. I will brag about that all day long. However, we don't have a ton of world championship caliber courses for pro worlds. I hosted AM Worlds in 2007. It was hosted in Madison, an hour away from me, in 2016. We just had the U.S. Women's there a year or two ago. We had Worlds here in 1998. Those were all very different times compared to what we
Right.
need today. 2007 did host a Pro Worlds up in northern Wisconsin, but that was on a 200-acre piece of private land that's struggling to maintain today, even High Bridge Hills. And so I that would be my one wish for Wisconsin, is that we had more hardcore championship, like elite level, gold level courses. Would be my only, I guess, wish. Now,
Hmm.
what Charlotte's done, what various parts of Texas have done, and some of those hotbeds that you mentioned, I totally agree. I think you have great courses. People
Yeah.
are migrating there. Good players are there. And then that helps foster additional good players. I think that's going to continue to be a trend. I don't know if we're going to see that happening necessarily in Wisconsin, but I think that will be a trend in a lot of those warmer weather climates for sure.
Whether it's in Wisconsin, and I know you talked about like the property being a factor, the landscape that you're going to be working with, but what do you think are some common mistakes that course designers make? Like if
Sure.
somebody finds themselves in that opportunity, because it seems like a lot of people set out to be course designers and then maybe don't get the opportunities, and some people just like stumble into it because they're the local, disc golf guy. What do you think are some like common mistakes that people make? Maybe advice that you would give people that happen to be designing a course.
Yeah, and I think your example, or just even kind of the setup there, was perfect, because what happens is you have a community. Like, I've been to enough. I've probably been to more board and park and rec meetings than most on the planet. Um, and what happens is one may say, "Oh, we've heard about this disc golf. Our neighboring community has it. we should get it too. And then someone says, oh, is Jones Park good for that? And someone's like, oh yeah, probably. And then someone says, hey, doesn't your kid play? Yeah. Get him in here. He's a disc golf guy. Like, he knows, right? And then next thing you know, this somebody maybe not qualified is heading up this course project. So that happens all too often, unfortunately. And then what they do is they try to cram too many holes in, and or they just don't keep safety as paramount. And I feel like that's easily the number one concern that I have. Is the best line I heard, and I think it still gets used today, is imagine the worst possible throw someone could have when you're out there designing a course, the worst possible throw someone could make, and then double it. Like, that's how you should think about course design.
Yeah.
And I heard that 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's still true to this day, especially because discs have only gotten faster, right? And there's more people playing with more power. And so you always have to keep that in mind. Also, I feel like sometimes people think if you just leave more trees in the way, that will make the hole harder and the course better or championship caliber. I feel like that's a mistake as well. Now, clearly, it's easier to take them out than it is to put them back. I understand that. I'm not suggesting you go out and start, clear cutting on day one. I like that people work, let a course kind of get worked in. But all too often, people are like, well, we're going to make this so hard, like Simon Lizotte isn't even going to be able to throw this line. And it's like, oh, well, it's probably not a good hole. Like, if you're just think, well, I'm just going to leave a ton of trees out there, and that's what's going to make it difficult. Now, I love wooded golf. I mean, as much as anyone. And so I'm not suggesting to not have it. Just realize that just because there's trees in the fairway doesn't mean that it's a good thing. So that's probably my number one tip is, more trees and just adding length that doesn't make for a better course. It clearly all has to be strategic. And then I would say know your audience. If you're in a community of 3,000 people, like I've done a few of these at schools especially, but you're in a community of 3,000 people, they've never seen disc golf there, and you have 15 acres, you don't have to go out and make a bunch of 400 and 500 foot holes, because you're kind of constrained to maybe 9 holes. So you're like, wow, I gotta, we're gonna make the most of this. I'm not saying make them all 160 feet, but just know your audience. And then if it's popular and it's well received at a beginner or an intermediate level, so to speak, for the course, the city and the village or a local will recognize that, and they can then maybe get to that championship level course. But I think too many people have this notion of, I got to make the biggest badass course I can go make, when really you have to know and play to your audience. I remember getting a terrible review on a local course. Like, this is just the worst course in the world. This is a waste of 9 baskets. It's just terrible. Why would you bother? Rip these up and put them down the road. And it's like, no, a-hole. There's already an 18-hole course there that's super challenging. This is for this community. And if it's too easy for you, drive the 6 minutes to this other really good course.
Yeah, just
like,
go to the other one.
That's their, and to this day, 20 years later, we host an annual family function or family-based activity that's through the Park and Rec department on this same course 20 years later after I've put it in. So it's serving its purpose perfectly. And if you're too good, then go out and play all putters, or go work on your approaches, or, bring a new player out to that course. That course still fits the bill. It's not a bad course. You just don't know what you're doing or how to use it.
Well, and I think I saw recently that you just added a feature where you can tag courses with skill level, like beginner, intermediate, advanced.
Oh, sure.
And so I think it's a huge help, because, there's like a couple courses here in town that are, maybe not everybody's favorite, or players go there and they're like, oh, it's not it's not my favorite. It's not whatever. It's not that great. And you would hate to see courses like that get bad reviews, just because they are really designed for a different audience. That it's not, if you're an MA1 player or something, it's not really for you. So I think disc golf is now a big enough audience that we have these sort of like subsets of players within it that need a different type of course, that need a beginner friendly course versus, a championship level course.
Yeah, and I learned, I think this is maybe one of the biggest life lessons out there is like you can't please everyone all the time because then you'll please no one, right?
That's right. Yeah.
However, it is still frustrating for somebody to give you a bad course review when they clearly like they miss the point, right? Like they rate you on something, it's like that wasn't the intended audience or effort or whatever. That still sometimes gets frustrating. So yeah, that's where even to this day though, almost any review I write on something, I kind of qualify myself and say, well, I'm if I left a review for uh, a restaurant or a club or something, I don't know, I would say like I'm a 45-year-old male. Here's what I did or didn't like about it. Like I kind of like to qualify it because my review may not be applicable to the 17-year-old female or to the 68-year-old, grandma. I like to kind of qualify it and maybe courses and I kind of do the same if I write a course review of any kind. Like here's what I liked about it and here's why. And here's maybe even my skill level or my knowledge base. More than I'm just rage reviewing from only your perspective.
Yeah, why are you going to the seafood restaurant if you're allergic to shellfish?
Bingo. Exactly. That's exactly it.
So you also mentioned that you've run some high-profile tournaments, worlds, and these are some things that I didn't know about in my research. Some of what we're talking about, like tournament directing stuff. How important are tournament directors to the sport?
I feel like I don't want to say they're everything because they're not. I mean, you need, we're obviously this is a big old pie and there's all these different pieces to it. And you need course designers, you need volunteers that then, may do 20 different functions, whether it's help at a tournament or do course clearing or course cleanup. But you need course designers, you need tournament directors, you need local league directors that are often have been volunteer based, right? Like there's so much to be learned at a local league. There's people that will play in a league format, and that's as formal as they'll ever get. But you're so impactful when you're that league director because you're helping share what the rules actually are. You're probably sharing course etiquette. You're helping organize course cleanup days. You're helping involve the community. So I look at a league director and a tournament director in a lot of similar ways, and they're paramount. I mean, they're so huge to the growth because they're sometimes the most structured that the most structured entity or person that somebody may get in disc golf. And you can go out and play with your 5 buddies and play 1,000 rounds over the next 5 years and never talk to another soul and absolutely love and enjoy disc golf. And there's going to be millions of people that continue to do that. If you ever take it to the very next step, it's probably a league or a tournament, a small time tournament. Maybe it's even unsanctioned. That's great too. It doesn't really matter. But hopefully those league and tournament directors are good, upstanding people that can be some form of role model. And that's exactly what I had in my life with, again, John Turlap and Tom Jenkins. They were the local league directors. They were the local tournament directors. And then I kind of slowly learned under them and took some of the pressures off of them and became that next wave, that next generation. And I think that's going to continue to happen. So they're huge. Respect them, whether they're making money or not, whether it's $5 or 500 or they're losing 500.
Entirely possible.
Every tournament director has done, I think, at some point, right? Like their advice to me in like the 1998 when I started running some of my first sanctioned tournaments was like, if you break even, you did a damn good job. Who in the world thinks that's like a good business model, right? Like who's like, man, if you put in all these hours, you deal with 100 phone calls, you deal with all these whiny, these people that can be real whiners and unappreciative. And when it's all said and done, after a couple months of work
Yeah,
and meetings and cities and planning and trophies and putting money on your credit card. If you break even, you did a damn good job. Like, what a silly proposition. Yet thousands of people are doing that. They're rolling those dice six-sided every single time. Like, how crazy is that? So, yes, they are paramount. Hopefully you have good ones. The bad ones will probably get chased out, but hopefully you have good ones. Ask them what you can do. Ask, how can I volunteer? Hey, do you need me to go set up the water bottles, or, do you need me to go, mark the mandos? Do whatever. But tournament directors are so critical to our overall growth. Now let's get them making real money. Like, that's the next step. We're already 20 or 30 years behind on that. Let's get them making some money for their efforts.
So, what advice would you have for somebody who's interested in getting into tournament directing? I would put myself in that category. We've hosted some unsanctioned stuff, and I'm curious. I've been thinking about taking that leap into sanctioned stuff. I've taken the tournament director exam. Not that that's all that difficult, but I've talked to Ken Rollins, our state coordinator in Ohio, and it does sort of feel like I'm ready, but am I? Like, what's some advice you would have for somebody in that position?
This sounds so obvious, but go help at a tournament. Don't just go play in somebody else's tournament, which is a good idea too, because then you'll see like what you liked, what you disliked, how did they, how was their communication. But go actually help somebody run a tournament for a weekend and just say, can I shadow you? Can I be of assistance? Helping. I mean, it's just like an internship. It's just like an apprenticeship or something like that. Helping someone run a tournament, or them allowing you to like at least be their shadow for the weekend, and it doesn't only happen during the weekend that it's run, but that is so crucial. Learning like, oh my gosh, why are you doing that? Oh, okay. Well, what if you did this? Maybe you'll have a new bright fresh idea, or maybe they'll say, no, we did that and here's why it didn't work. Shadowing a tournament director is the absolute best thing, and it may even chase you off, honestly. Like, I don't want to be entirely negative or pessimistic, but you may be like, man, you just went through that for this weekend. I don't want any part of that. I thought I was interested, but I'm not built that way. I don't have the customer service or the soft skills or the patience. Like, as I get older and crankier and have run hundreds of tournaments, like, I'm less inclined to put up with BS. And so I'm getting a little more snarky, if I possibly could be. But like, those are things you have to learn. Like, there's tournament directors to this day, I'm like, I don't know how you're doing this still. Like, I applaud them that they're not in jail after, ripping someone's head off. So take notes. What did you like about a tournament? Like, wow, they had lunch. Oh, well, it was, their lunch was buffet and it was gone by the time, the MA4 division got to it. I didn't really like that. Or, did they do a big player pack? Did they do a small player pack? What were payouts like? That kind of thing. Were there different divisions and different teas offered for said divisions? Did the tournament director at the last minute go from 72 players, a max field with four on every hole, and then all of a sudden said, well, actually we're gonna expand it. We're gonna go to 18 holes with 5 people on it. Oh, and actually we're gonna add three more holes, like temporary holes that usually suck. Like, that just made that experience that much worse for all the other players. It made like 18 people happy who got in, but it just made, and did that push it into darkness?
Yeah.
Did you have to start an hour earlier now because you're accommodating for more people? Where were the backups? Like, I feel like I could go on for 6 hours about tournament directing, but you take note of those things. If you're a tournament player or have been around tournaments, just physically write down and say, man, if I ran a tournament here, I wouldn't use the long tee on 6. Like, there's a 4-group backup. Nobody leaves a tournament and was like, man, I love that backup on 6. That was great. Like, no one says that. Or was the solution, man, Six had this 4-group backup and there wasn't a spotter. So everybody was just looking for, well, that might be an easy solution. Maybe you need 2 spotters there. Those are the types of things. You're not going to please everyone all the time. Again, no matter what you do. I've always said you could have a 200% payout tournament, and the first complaint will be, well, why isn't it 205%? Like, could we just pay out? Like, so you will never please everyone. However, find the best tournament in the state or in your area and go watch them. That would be my advice. Ask those tournament directors questions, not when they're busy, but ask them questions, and they'll probably be more than helpful, and will help you out.
Very nice. Love that. And thank you very much for the advice. I'm going to steal a little bit of that for me.
Yeah, if you and honestly, if you have any questions for me, whether it's another special segment on a podcast or you just want to call me up, I'm more than happy to give some advice. I'm never short of opinions.
Nice. Thank you so much. So, Terry, we see you week in, week out with the Disc Golf Network, or sometimes not. Maybe you have an off week. But I have a couple questions about that. Firstly, what's your official job title? Like, are you an employee of the Disc Golf Pro Tour? How does that work?
I just show up and say, I'm the disc golf guy now. I am, I guess I'd be listed as an independent contractor. I had it wasn't exclusive. I had a 3-year contract with them for the last 3 years, and I am just that. I'm an independent contractor to them. So unlike someone who's very close in my situation, like a Brian Earhart, Brian was originally a contractor and then was brought in as a full-time employee, where I and a lot of the commentators, almost all of the commentators, in fact, outside of Brian, almost everyone else is contracted. So myself, the Dosses, along with a Philo or an Ian or a Nate Sexton, everybody is pretty much on a contract basis with them.
Well, that's really interesting. That's one of those like sort of behind the scenes things that I wonder about, like what are all the logistics and the things of that nature. You mentioned earlier briefly talking about your family and your kids. How do you find a balance with how many weeks you're on the road? How often are you able to get home in between? In between events. Obviously, there's a lot of travel involved with pretty much everything about disc golf.
Yeah, I'll be the first to admit I am not a model father in that sense by any means. I am on the road a lot. I travel a ton.
Yeah.
The network, I want to say in 2023 had me at 22 or 23 different events.
Right.
And then you factor in all of my post-production events, you're talking another 15 to 20. I guess I should go do the numbers, but probably another 15 to 20 on top of it. So that means I'm gone quite a bit. I try to get back as much as I can. I only when it makes absolute logistical sense will I go to an event, usually on a Wednesday or a Thursday, go to that event or go be part of it, and then stay all the way through the next weekend's event and then come back. Logistically, that would make a little bit more sense more often than not, but I try to limit the amount of times that I do that. A great example is last year or in 2023, I would be at the Las Vegas Challenge on site for basically Wednesday through Sunday. But then the Memorial, I was doing the coverage for post-production for the Memorial, which also would start on, Wednesday or Thursday, and I'm only 4 hours away. It just made so much more sense to go right there. So I kind of have to factor those in, and I try to limit those, just because that creates such an extended period of me being gone for so long. Excuse me. So like everyone else would say, I try to make the best of when I'm home, is the best that I can offer. The other big challenge is even when I do get home often on a Monday morning or a Monday afternoon, right away on Tuesday night is our podcast that we do with Smashbox, which we do live. And so Tuesday night is already kind of reserved for that. So I may be leaving as early as Wednesday or Thursday again. It makes for a very short week. So when I'm back and around, I try to be all hands on deck as much as I possibly can, and that involves a lot of, daddy taxi service for my teenage girls at this point. So I do the best I can is pretty much all I can say.
Nice. Yeah, and, I was just curious, I think, work-life balance has become just a much more sort of common topic of discussion that people are thinking about. I think COVID kind of put a magnifying glass on that. It was something
Hmm.
that came up a lot in discussion and conversation when I worked at Apple, as well.
Well, I I think that real quick on that one, hopefully my girls who don't really play too much, very rarely will they play. They've gone to a couple Rocky Mountain women's events and enjoyed themselves where they've played, but hopefully they'll maybe join me a little bit more. They're getting even a little bit older, so
Yeah.
uh, I'm trying to make sure that they're seeing either the new areas that I'm going to and or just some of the work that I do, because even if they have no interest in actual broadcasting, maybe there's a tangent to that they could do. Maybe event support. Maybe they're, and it doesn't have to be within disc golf, but they're seeing like, hey, there's all these other kind of fun jobs that exist, whether it's in disc golf or beyond. So event support. Then there's things like, obviously photography, and then there's overall management. There's the retail side of things. There's so many more things, and I'd like to introduce them and say, well, here's what disc golf, some of the jobs, many of these just created in the last few years. Here's what disc golf can offer. So even if it's not here, maybe there's somewhere else that you could apply some of these concepts to.
Yeah.
And then the other quick piece I'll say about that and work and life balance and everything else, you're at work roughly a third of your life. You're talking about 8+ hours. Usually, when you add in then the drive time there and back, you're talking about 8+ hours a day, 40 to 50 hours a week for most people. When it's all said and done, find something you love. Like, I don't care what it is. Quit, quit being in jobs that you hate. I don't care what it costs. Now, you may have to build to it, and I'm not a motivational speaker here, but find a way to love what you do. And that might be part-time, that might be 2 hours a week and then turns into 10, and then eventually it could be 30 or 40, or maybe it's only 25 and that's all you need to live. But for the love of God, like I really have a hard time listening to people complain about how much they hate their job, but they're not doing anything to fix it or address it or remedy it or look for that alternative. Find that alternative. You may not love your job, and I'm okay with that, but there is a job or a career out there that you will love. Work toward that. I guarantee you there's a way to make it happen.
Yeah, I love what you said about it being a process. It took me 3 years, 3 years from the time that I actually started doing any kind of disc golf business to, get to the point where I could leave my job.
Sure.
When we first reached out to you, Terry, about sponsoring one of your videos a few years ago, it was just to try and give away some mystery boxes to like promote our mystery boxes. But, we've changed a lot over the last few years as well. And, mystery boxes are only a tiny little piece of what we do now.
Hmm.
I don't think that I've said it publicly in any of our content that we do, but I wouldn't have been able to jump off and do six-sided discs full time if it wasn't for my wife and getting a really good job and supporting our family to fortunately she's in a role that she loves and she is excited about, and that's afforded me the opportunity to do the same thing and to pursue the thing that I'm really passionate about. So it takes a team. It takes a village, right? That's what they say. And thank goodness that she found that job, or else I wouldn't be able to find the thing that I loved and pursue it. Whether it is super financially lucrative or not. Hopefully, hopefully for anyone out there who's listening, they're able to find that thing that applies to them and that makes them happy, that they want to do, and that they can pursue that.
Yeah, I guarantee it's out there, and it's funny because people always like, well, but I'm into I don't know, Back to the Future nostalgia. I'm like, there's podcasts, there's conferences, there's so many ways that you could then turn that into, being the expert on, Back to the Future, the Back to the Future trilogy series, like whatever. I mean, just you name it. There's a way more than ever today here in 2024. There's a way to turn that into a career, or if not a career, at least a very legitimate side hustle that keeps you happy and looking forward to doing that, whenever you want to be part of it. It's all out there.
I love it. All right. Hopefully, we've inspired a couple people.
Hopefully.
I love it. So, back to commentary. We've seen a few different moves in the last couple of years in the disc golf, sort of coverage space. We've seen events featured on ESPN2, CBS Sports, but I got some statistics there, not necessarily our disc golf event coverage, but the number of Americans who watch TV is only going down via cable and satellite, I should say.
Mm-hmm.
Cable and satellite went down from 76% in 2015 to only 56% in 2021. And obviously, my generation is certainly kind of leading this cable cutting thing. So, what, if any, value do you see traditional cable broadcast television having for disc golf, other than maybe exposing the sport to some new people or something like that?
Great question, because in a few years it may be continuing to dwindle, and there's this, I think there's this nostalgia, or this idea of the end all be all, right? Like when I was first introduced to disc golf, I thought, oh, I can't wait till this is on ESPN, or this really blows up. And when we've been on ESPN, we've been on ESPN2, or all these different programs, and it's really cool for my generation, for your generation, for people of, the ESPN world that used to maybe even live and breathe ESPN as the official, the holy grail of sports networks. I don't know that people are going to care in 20 years if it's on ESPN or CBS, because just the way we're watching things differently. I think it's cool. I think people older than me find that it's cool, and it's kind of validating in a lot of ways. But is that really going to have a big payoff? That's a good question. I think it's a matter of how will the advertisers. I hate to say it, but we got to kind of follow the money a little bit. Will advertisers still find it important? Because if someone's watching us on the World Championship recap, and it's on CBS, and an LL Bean is watching that, and they're like, hey, we see our logos everywhere, this is awesome, we're so happy to be here,
right? Yeah.
Then that's kind of like the first piece of the puzzle, right? Is if they're happy, because they're the ones that sponsored the World Championships to a large degree, knowing that it might get on, a CBS Sports. So I kind of like to look at sponsorship in reverse. For a lot of people will say, here's what I offer, here's the 6 different options, here's what I offer. I'd rather the sponsor say, hey, can we do this? Can we do this? Here's what would make us happy. If you're making the sponsor happy and they find it fulfilling and they find it as a good bang for their buck, then that is, to me, like the major first step. So if tomorrow Franklin came along and said, you know what, we'd like to dump $1 million into this, because here's the other ways that disc golf is going to get exposure, and we want our name attached to that, and they say we're going to dump $1 million into it, but we would love Flanners on all 18 holes with our logo, and the right tour event or the right stop wants to do that, and they want to put $1 million toward it, sure, let's do that. They have to be happy, right? Because that's where the money's coming from. And I'm not just suggesting, oh, let's just do whatever we can to sell out. I don't want to be misconstrued in that way, but it starts with the sponsors and the people that are outlaying the cash and the money to make sure that they're finding value in it. You and I may say in 10 years, like, who cares about CBS? But if the people writing the checks still care about us being on CBS, well, we're going to probably listen to what they have to say if they're writing the check. So I don't know if that was an answer, but for me as an old school golfer, it provides a little bit of validity is what it does. Is it the end all be all though? No, I've changed perspectives. I no longer like I don't want to say I don't care if it's on those places, but just like you said, if a lot less people are watching it or discovering it, it's not as impactful. It would be kind of like, you saying to me, well, I'm going to write this really incredible piece, and it's going in my local newspaper as a headline, front page story. And it's like, all right, well, that doesn't mean what it did 20 years ago. So I think we need to be cognizant of, is there value there, and how valuable is it? And then the people that want to support it, make sure you align with them.
Yeah, I like what you said about making sponsors happy, because I think that's a huge part of kind of the growth of the sport. We've seen some new brands jump in recently with LL Bean, Barbasol, East Coast Metal Roofing, putting up big money, backing disc golf and seeing the value in it, and kind of maybe just understanding more about the demographic that disc golf appeals to. And to that end, I think you've done a great job of that yourself. So I'm just going to get a little piece of commentary from Terry Miller, who said something along the lines of, I once saw a full beard grown in the time it took for Gannon to throw a shot. Barbasol can help take care of that.
That yeah, and to be fair, that wasn't a pre-planned plug or piece whatsoever. But that was my lighthearted ribbing of the time in which, of course, Gannon sometimes likes to push his 30-second allowed limit. So yeah, that sounds like right. And I will say, we did get feedback from the first year that we had Barbasol involved with the Tour Championships, which I believe was 2 years ago. So in the 2022 version, through our account, rep and everything else, the guy that deals with Barbasol, or the company that then is the intermediary to Barbasol, so on and so forth, we got some feedback that they really enjoyed our engagement. They enjoyed kind of the some of the playful nature. Now, who was that? To what degree they enjoyed it, I don't have all those exact details, but just sometimes a little bit of product placement. I know some people like to make fun of the idea. Oh, there's Barbasol sitting on the uh, the broadcast desk. Really, like that is that hurting your viewing pleasure? I mean, but Barbasol might find that incredibly impactful, or just the ways that we kind of engage and call out some of those things. A lot of people made a really big deal over the yeeting the disc, but that was hooligans request. That was at their request to have those ad reads, and it was crazy how
Mm-hmm.
worked up and pissed off people really got toward me or Ian or whomever, who were sometimes essentially just reading this ad read, and they were like taking it personal toward us, which I didn't think is fair. But um if that's what hooligan wanted,
Oh, yeah.
that's what they got. And again, there's a fine line of like, yeah, like I'm not suggesting we'll do anything and everything to sell out for a buck either, but if it's, not overly, I don't want to say not overly serious, if it's not harming or damaging to anyone else, like, it's their sponsorship money. Let's do what they want and make them happy.
Well, and I think a lot of people have disc golf because it's a newer sport and they put it up on a pedestal and they kind of have this idea of what it's supposed to be or what it's been.
Mm.
That change is hard. But you look at the commercialization of other sports like football, basketball, hockey. How often are those fans just sort of like sitting around and waiting for the TV commercial for the people watching at home? And but honestly, that TV money is what makes that thing happen.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, disc golf is just new to that, and that's something we're going to have to deal with as, growing pains for the sport. Nobody wants to sit through, 5 minutes of commercials in a football game, but there they are.
Yeah, it is funny how much we're starting to mimic some of those other sports, and I don't want us to get all the way there. Obviously, some of that it feels like it's overly commercialized, or you don't want it to legitimately detract from the game or the experience. So that's gonna be a really fine line, and then finding people that really want to align with supporting disc golf and supporting and having access to our demographic. I think that may be constantly evolving and changing as well. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out.
To that line that I gave you about Gannon and Barbasol, is there a favorite line of commentary that you've done? One that stands out in your mind, or that maybe you've heard people repeat to you, or something like that?
Uh, there's no doubt that one of my biggest flubs certainly is one that gets repeated quite often and or referenced, and totally legitimately and understandably. That, so what was that, Texas State's a couple years ago, when I talked about some, we'll say, friendly trees, and but that doesn't bother me. It's so funny how quickly I even thought to myself, like, I made an honest mistake
Yeah.
while doing my job. And it just happened to be live, and tens of thousands and now maybe hundreds of thousands of people have heard it and know about it. But it doesn't really, impact me in any negative way in that
Right,
sense.
right.
Um, I, it's so funny. I maybe I do a poor job of reflecting, but I don't know if there's any specific, some, maybe I would twist that slightly and say something that sticks out at me is commentary and the evolution of it, and how we went from filming, and how I used to film during a round and I was doing commentary as they were throwing. So some of the first ever shot by shot coverage that I was doing, instead of having a microphone pointing toward the play, it was actually pointing back toward me, because I was doing all the filming, all the editing, all the everything. And there was no post round commentary. It was, hey, Waisaki's stepping up. This is going to be from about 28 feet. And then he would putt. Like, just to think we've evolved. And then live broadcasting had exclusively commentary right there on site. I was out in the field doing a lot of that. And then I think of a few crucial moments within commentary for post production. I think of, again, at one point I said, man, that'd be kind of cool to have like a couple of our players commentate on their footage. And I want to say it was like 2015, 14, 16, somewhere, I don't even remember anymore, where I had like Macbeth and Sexton, I think, commentate on a round in Texas. That was before Big Sexy got formed, or before any other commentary teams, or I think maybe Simon and Eagle did on one of hers, me and Simon, or something like that, something in Texas, I remember. And then that kind of started a whole new string of, wait a minute, let's get some of our top players to commentate. Because I say this all the time, and I'm glad to share this one more time. I do commentary to help speed up the post-production process. I don't do it to fill some void or need or ego. If I'm alone or with someone, I'm doing it because it helps get the product out quicker. In a perfect world, I would love to have every single tournament, even the ones in post, where I film them and edit them, or I'm part of it, and then I sit two other people down and let them have at it. I don't need to be part of it. I am, because it usually makes the product get out quicker. So I love to make sure I clarify. Some people think it's like some ego thing where I'm just dying to get on a mic. I'm not. I don't need to talk more. I talk plenty, trust me. So just to put that out there. But that made a whole different shift. That shifted everything in disc golf post production, is when we first had a couple of our players sit down, and then obviously these teams formed and these relationships formed and branding formed, all this other stuff. There again, Jomez, in an early video, I think, had Paul and Sexton do it. I've had Sexton do it. Simon has been on stuff. Eagle's been on my stuff. Just recently in 2016, it was a kind of a monumental thing. It was myself and Waisaki did the Masters Cup, which is the event where the raptor legs were born, was that event. And the audio is terrible because I didn't know what I was doing, but we did it a day or two after the tournament, his final round, and it's the most viewed video I've ever had. It was also a legendary event, but just some of those kind of taking a chance of those iterations of different people and different times have been incredible. And then to have Ricky just on my channel a few weeks ago, and that was the only other time he's done post-production commentaries, 2 times on my channel 7 years apart. Like, those are kind of cool moments for me. So when I think back to commentary and reflecting on some of those are some of the times where I've sat down with an Eagle or a Germ or whomever, Silas Schultz, discovering someone like a Silas Schultz to realize just how damn good Silas is on the mic, or to realize how good Dave Greenwell, one of the greatest players on the planet, this legend in every sense of it. And then for him and I to do post-production commentary during the 2023 Pro Masters Worlds, like, that's a moment that he and I may never forget, was him doing commentary for that. So those are the kinds of experiences that, I guess, when you ask what steps out, it's really those that jump out to me.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. And that's really cool. And talking about, even I hear a lot about this in like the world of soccer. I'm a big soccer fan, where
Okay.
athletes who are getting toward the end of their career have to start sort of thinking and realizing that there is a period of time beyond being an athlete, beyond being the professional
Mm.
player. And you see players starting to kind of figure that out in disc golf. Kale LaVisca opening his own course at the Preserve. Germ, Nate Sexton, you see, like, almost certainly they're going to continue to be involved in commentary or media, whether that's Jomez or somewhere else. Brian Earhart is a great example. He's, so well spoken. He's so great on camera, so capable of sort of being in that moment live, and, sometimes fulfilling a role that you do on DGN.
Yeah.
You're talking about Silas as a great example too, and it's maybe just an opportunity for people to learn more, about where the sport, where it's going, what other roles are there available in the media, and whatever. There's entire players in soccer whose careers, sort of naturally just transitioned into being pundits and just talking about and sharing their opinions about, coaches and players and stuff like that. So,
Mm-hmm.
Being a former participant, you have all those experiences that you can draw on to, help improve the product that's out there.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully there'll just continue to be more opportunities in disc golf for people to, discover, hey, oh, I'm really good at this other thing that connects to the sport, that's related to the sport. AJ Risley is a camera operator these days, used to be a professional player. So I think there's just so many great examples, and maybe that's players becoming managers. Ricky had a manager the last couple of years. Other players have been experimenting with that. So I think we have a lot yet to see where disc golf is going to go.
Yeah, and that kind of goes along with what I was saying earlier. Is there's so many opportunities now in disc golf that if you have maybe a specific skill set, you possibly can certainly excel, and then I'll say win over the favor, or convince the right people, or a handful of people, to then become a client, or become someone that you represent in some capacity, whether that's management or social media. I mean, the fact that we have a handful of people that are exclusively as a job doing social media for a handful of golfers is a perfect evolution, or a perfect depiction of exactly what we're talking about. Like that would be a crazy statement 10 years ago, and today is 100% viable. I mean, you have to be good at what you do, and then maybe you need a connection, or something to fall in line. But if you're good, and this can be said of a lot of things, if you're damn good, you're eventually going to get discovered, or called, or needed, or requested, or whatever. If you're just undeniably good at something and passionate about it, you probably won't be denied. So yeah, and everyone you just said, I think of Sarah Hokum thinking about commentary and probably doing a little bit more as her career is getting into the later years. Obviously, Elaine King, which has been a contributor, and Ken Climo we're seeing getting more involved. Philo's been involved. I worry that at some point we're going to get to a point where too many players will think they're good for it, and we won't have enough spots for them, because everybody's going to want to do it. But what a good problem to have, right? And even if maybe you're a second tier second tier at that, maybe you don't get a shot at the big show, but maybe you and another friend of yours go start your own podcast or go do your own analysis or something like that. The possibilities are endless, really.
Absolutely. Well, Terry, it's been a delight chatting with you and kind of learning about all the different hats that you've worn in your time in disc golf. It's fascinating, and I hope I know I've learned a lot, and I know hopefully our viewers have learned a lot as well. I want to close with your unique perspective, being so close to the action so often. Some predictions, whatever you see, let's say in your crystal ball for 2024. Are we going to see a new breakout star? Are we going to see a repeat winner at Worlds or a new champion like this past season? What do you see coming down the pipeline in disc golf?
I probably would sound like an idiot if I didn't say that I think we'll see more parity in both the divisions. I know we've seen some dominance, but with that comes a lot of people charging and X's on the back. And as much as it's been in my heyday when I watched a Climo and a Barry Schultz and a Scott Stokely kind of dominate, and a Ron Russell and then eventually a Felberg and a Doss and those types dominate, and then that shifted into Paul McBeth and Ricky Wysocki. I think their days are numbered in dominance. They're going to continue to be top level players, but anyone dominating time and time again, I think is going to be near impossible because of the level of competition that continues to rise. I mean, the fact that we had to have such an argument about player of the year between Calvin Heinberg and Isaac Robinson, kind of exactly, I mean, just to think we're arguing about those two seasons and how good they are. So I think we're going to continue to see a lot more players charge. I'd love to see both on the MPO and FPO a little resurgence from our champs in a Paul McBeth. I'd love to see him make a hard push to come back and reclaim some dominance or some top level spots, but it's going to be really tough. And on the FPO side, Paige Pierce is going to be chomping at the bit to do the same thing. I think it's going to be tough because you have these new people in place, but I think she's going to come back hungry. We'll see if that translates. If her hunger and her raw skill sets are enough to get back there and constantly be in that conversation. I think Kristen's going to have another solid year. But again, she's got a really big X on her back. It might be the friendliest, warmest, nicest smile and big, most polite X you've ever seen because she's so beloved, understandably. But even if you can appreciate and love how good she is, you still want to beat her. And I think we're going to see some women that are going to try and make that charge even more so. We'll see. It should be exciting. I guess that's at the end of the day, that's the best part is everything I may think or you may think and say isn't going to matter. It's all going to see what plays out on the course. And I think we can guarantee excitement is going to be there pretty much at every single tournament. And I think for that, we're all winners. So I don't know if that's a bold prediction or not. I think you're going to see things spread out. You're going to see some more diverse, not diverse wins. You're going to see just more parity. I think clawing, fighting, scratching for those wins, it's going to be that much tougher.
Well, whether the winner comes from lead card, chase card, or somewhere further down the pack, we'll look forward to hearing you commentate about it this season on the Disc Golf Network.
All right, looking forward to it. Thank you guys, and hopefully whether it's live or post-production, you guys are tuned in. We're taking in all the best in disc golf.
Absolutely. Everybody, make sure that you're following Terry Miller and the Disc Golf Guy, who is rapidly approaching 100,000 subscribers. We are going to be waiting for you to hit that mark, and we'll be there to celebrate right along with you. Thanks again so much for joining us, Terry.
Thank you.
I hope you all enjoyed this episode of All Six Sides. Thanks again to Terry Miller for joining us. Make sure you tune in to the 2024 Memorial Championship with post-production coverage on the Disc Golf Guide channel starting this Friday, March 1st. Who would you like to see on a future episode? Leave a comment down below. For Six Sided Discs, I'm Greg. We'll see you in the next one. If you like this content and want to see more, please consider liking the video, subscribing to our channel, or supporting us on Patreon. Your support makes this content possible.